Hello and welcome. This is Jennifer McGuire and I hope you're having a good day. So it's Diecember over at Simon Says Stamp, and that's a whole month dedicated to die cutting. I thought I would kick it off by doing a video showing my 5 favorite die cutting techniques, and I'm also going to show you all of the new products that Simon Says Stamp released for Diecember. So I will show you examples, show you the products, use the products, and more. So it's got a lot of information in here, and I'm hoping it inspires you to do some die cutting too. I will also provide links to videos that show more about these 5 favorite techniques. So if you want to learn more, you can check those out too. Let's get started with my first favorite technique that I like to do with die cutting, and that is scrap inlay. This is an excellent way to use up any cardstock, patterned paper, or stamped scraps, along with die cutting to create beautiful inlay looks. I've done many videos on using scraps, but I love to do rainbow scraps more than anything, so I'll do that today. I have Stick-It double-sided adhesive here that I'm putting onto a piece of printer paper. I just wanted a thin paper here, no need to use cardstock. So basically I'll have thin white paper with adhesive on the back. I like Stick-It adhesive because it's also thin, so it die cuts easily. Also, you have a little time to move things around before it stays put when you press it down. Now off screen, I went through my drawers of scraps. I have 5 drawers and they're just broken up into color families. And I took out bright colored cardstock scraps and I cut thin strips from them. So I did not measure these strips. They're all different widths. That saves a lot of time also. This is a great way to use up any of those little pieces you have left over. I'm also saving time by pressing the cardstock strips onto the adhesive in a diagonal. By not doing them straight, I don't have to worry if I kind of curve a little bit as I go, but it is pretty easy to keep these straight if you just put each scrap right up against the last. Once I covered the entire piece, I just flipped it over and I cut anything that was hanging off the edge, and I can use those scraps for something else if I want. And basically I have my own custom rainbow paper. It's much bigger than I needed, but that's okay. I can make multiple cards. Okay, so now that we have our scrap background, let's do some die cut inlay. I'm using the Simon Says Stamp Large Outline Thanks die. This is the first new die from the Diecember release from Simon Says Stamp. And I love that you can do really bold cards with this. It cuts the large block, the word thanks, and then the outline for each of the letters, which makes it fun to do for inlay. But keep in mind you could use the thanks outline letters by themselves or the bold thanks letters by themselves and stretch them across a card. Many things you can do with this die. Okay, so I'm going to start by using my rainbow scrap paper and die cutting using my Gemini Junior die cutting machine, but any die cut machine should work for this. I do recommend using a metal adapter plate just to make sure it cuts through all of that cardstock and printer paper and adhesive. If you don't have a metal adapter plate, you could just run it through multiple times or use a cardstock shim. Here you can see that it die cut beautifully, and we have the thanks block, the solid thanks letters, and the outline. And so I have pieces that I can use on multiple cards. I also die cut 3 times from white cardstock and once from black cardstock. I'm gluing the 3 white cardstock blocks together so that I have nice dimension. I thought that would add a lot to this inlay technique. I am then going to put glue on the back of that layered die cut and add it to a piece of white cardstock. I'll trim off the excess later. Now I'm going to use my liquid adhesive once again to put a little bit of adhesive right on the inside of those die cut block letters. I then am doing the black outline, and I'm pressing that in with my craft pick, and then inside of that I'll use my rainbow die cuts. So I have stacked white die cuts on the outside, and then inside I'm inlaying the black outline and then the rainbow solid letters. I love the bold look of this, but you definitely could use any kind of solid scrap for each of those letters if you prefer. I'm actually making 2 cards at once since we had all of those pieces. So for the card on the left, I took my rainbow thanks block, so the outline here, and I'm gluing that onto a piece of white cardstock, and we'll trim the excess off later. Now inside of this, I'm going to glue the white outline letters. So I just run the liquid adhesive on the inside edge of those letter openings. Press in the white outline, and then in the inside of that, I'm going to stack 3 white letter die cuts, and then a black one on top of that. You definitely do not need to stack these die cuts for either of these cards. I just really like the look of that added dimension. You could leave it as a smooth inlay if you prefer. Now to balance out some of that bold color, I'm using Simon Says Stamp Fog cardstock. I thought it would be fun to give it a little bit of shimmer, so I'm spraying it with Sukaneko Shimmer Spritz. I just spray it right on. This happens to be a fog note card that I created, a nice light gray. I spray it on, wipe a little bit of the excess off to make it smooth, and then dry it with my heat gun. And I have a shimmer, kind of champagne looking cardstock. So once I was done with this, I went ahead and finished off those two thanks panels and matted them on black cardstock. And for this particular one, I just glued it right onto that note card that we added the shimmer to. Now I noticed I got some glue where I didn't need it, so I just let it dry, and then I used my Creative Detailer tool to rub that away, so I had a nice clean look. So here are the two completed cards. I love that I could quickly make two at once, and I was able to use up some scraps that I had been hoarding. So for the first card, you can see how the letters stand out against the inlay of the rainbow background and the white outline. I also added a sentiment strip from the Simon Says Stamp Sentiment Strip collection. I really like these because they're ready to go. All you have to do is trim them into a strip and add them to your card. You can even foil them if you want to. Now the other card on the right, this one has the rainbow letters and the black outline set back into the white stacked die cut outline. And then there you can see that little bit of shimmer that I have on my fog note card. I wish I could catch it in the video here, but I promise there's lots of shine to it in real life. And there you can see the fun inlay look with lots of dimension. I have another scrap inlay technique card example for you today because it's definitely one of the best techniques. And this one, I used the new Simon Says Stamp Lined U die set. So you have the solid shadow U, and then you have these cool detailed U letters that you can add on top or use separately. So I used these dies and die cut from lots of colorful scraps that I had. So I did the shadow in kind of a turquoise blue color. Then I did the U letters from white cardstock and then also some colorful cardstock. I'm gluing the white outline piece onto the shadow. And then in those little openings, I'm running some liquid adhesive and then popping in some colorful pieces. So again, you'll have lots of pieces left over from doing this technique so you can make additional cards. So this is a true inlay here. We're inlaying these colorful pieces into the white outline, and this die is perfect for this technique. I love putting puzzles together. It's one of the things that I enjoy doing. It kind of calms me down a bit, and this really feels a lot like that. So I definitely would give this a try if you've never done it before. So I added that onto a white note card and then added another Simon Says Stamp sentiment strip right across the top. Simple card, but has a lot of interest thanks to that fun die and the colorful cardstocks. Before we move on, I wanted to show you some other new Simon Says Stamp Diecember products that would be great for this technique. One is the Simon Says Stamp Blessing die. So this has that thin outline, the block letter of blessing, and then the little individual letters that fit in. This would be excellent for using scraps to do an inlay technique. And by the way, if you want to check out a video showing more examples of using scraps with the die cut inlay technique, I will link to one here. These examples are from that video, so be sure to check it out if you're interested. Okay, the next technique that I like for die cutting, my second favorite, is stained glass. This is a fun way to add lots of shine and interest to your die cuts, lots of dimension too. And I did it for the little paint palette that you see here. For this, I used the new Simon Says Stamp Art Supplies die set. This is such a fun and cute set. You have the little watercolor palette, you have a paintbrush and scissors, and then the layering pieces to create a layered look. I thought this would be fun to do the stained glass technique. For that, I'm using that paint die, and I die cut it 4 times from white cardstock. I'm gluing the first one onto a piece of white cardstock scrap. I'm going to set that aside to dry. While that's drying, I have pieces of the scissors that I'm gluing together. I die cut the scissors from silver cardstock and then orange cardstock for the handles. And then we have some brown cardstock and white cardstock and silver for the paintbrush. I love that you can layer them together like that. Now that that paint palette piece is dry, I'm going to add color into the openings. I'm using my Copic markers, but you could definitely use whatever coloring method you want. And it doesn't matter if you go outside of the lines. We're going to cover them up in a moment. So I just added a bunch of colorful colors into all of those openings. Once I was done, I put adhesive around it and then added the other 3 white paint die cuts on top. So you can see how I covered up the scribbling that was outside of the lines. And all we're doing is adding dimension up to this. So the color is set back and the white is raised. I then used my scissors to trim around the excess so we have this fun little paint die cut. Now, along with my little assembled die cuts here, I used a sentiment from the older Simon Says Stamp Crafty Friends stamp set, and that's the set that you see over there to the left. I used the sentiment that says, "You make everything colorful." I'm also using the Simon Says Stamp thin frame die set. I'm going to show you that die set later on in this video. But from that die set, I took a circle and die cut it from white cardstock to get the solid white circle and glued it onto a white note card. And then I die cut that die also from black cardstock, and it cuts this thin black frame that I glued around that. And I like that finishing kind of frame to this little collage of art supplies that we're going to put at the center. And again, I'll show you that die set later in this video. Okay, so off screen, I went ahead and stamped and assembled those pieces. And now we're doing the stained glass technique. What I'm doing here is filling in those openings where we added that color with glossy accents. This will give this fun stained glass look. It makes those colored spots look like glass when it dries. Now, this stained glass approach is more effective with a bigger die with bigger openings, but I thought it would be fun for this card too. It does take some time for all of that glossy accents to dry since we're putting a thick layer on, but once it does, look at the beautiful shine that you get. Lots of dimension and lots of shine. There was another die in this new Simon Says Stamp release that would be perfect for this technique, and that is this new Stylized Angel die. So you do it exactly the same. Die cut it from white cardstock and back it with white cardstock. Add the color in and then glue 3 more white die cuts on top and then fill in all those openings with glossy accents. And it would give the most amazing stained glass look. Now, if you want to learn more about the stained glass die cutting technique, I have a video that features the cards that you see here. Really gives a good stained glass look to them. And I will link to that here if you want to learn more. It really is a fun technique that works great with any dies that have open areas. Okay, my third favorite die cutting technique is definitely embossed impressions. This is great when you have any dies that have lots of detail to them. If you look closely at the snowflake at the center of it, you see a shiny silver and it has lots of texture to it. And that's what we get with the embossed impression technique. This is the Simon Says Stamp Shimmer Snowflake die set. There is the die that cuts the snowflake with lots of detail, and then the outline die that has faux stitching on the outside edge. So you can use these together or separately, and I'll be using them together today. I like that both dies are included because you can get many looks. Here I use them both together. On the left is just the outline. On the right is the snowflake with the outline. And then this is just the snowflake itself cut from white cardstock. Lots of detail on both dies, which gives great looks. Okay, let's start by using the outline, and I'm just die cutting it from some dark turquoise cardstock. This time I grabbed my Spellbinders Platinum 6, but you could definitely use whatever die cut machine you have. Now I'm going to use the embossing mat. So this is a great tool to have for any die cut machine. It allows you to press a die into cardstock instead of cutting with it. So I have that on my platform, and then I'm putting my cardstock die cut right on top of it. Then I'm going to use my anti-static powder tool on both the die and on my die cut. I'm going to lightly tap Versamark ink onto the cutting edge, the raised edges of my die, just very, very, very lightly. Then I will carefully lay this onto our die cut. You want to make sure it doesn't move around. I'm just going to lay it right on top of there. So we have ink on the raised cutting edges, but since I'm using that embossing mat, it's going to press the ink in instead of cutting. Now I'll run this through my die cut machine. With most machines, you use whatever sandwich you use for an embossing folder. Now I'm going to run this back and forth a few times. It easily goes through. And when I take it off, I'll carefully remove the die from the cardstock. Remember, all it did was make an impression. Now onto this, I'm going to put silver embossing powder. You can use any color you want. But what's happened is we pressed Versamark ink into those indentations, into the little valleys on this die cut. So you want to make sure that the embossing powder gets in there nicely, and then we're going to heat set it. And what we have is a die cut with lots of texture and thin silver shine that we got by doing the embossed impression technique. Such a fun technique. I've done many videos, and again, I'll link to them later. I used the outline of the snowflake die to cut from a lighter blue cardstock, and I'm gluing that onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card. Now my embossed snowflake that we created earlier, I die cut 3 more snowflakes and put it behind it so there was dimension, and I glued that into the opening on our card. Here I'm using the Simon Says Stamp Bold Thanks die. I die cut 3 of these from white cardstock, glued them together, and added them right onto our card. Here I have a sentiment strip from Simon Says Stamp, and on the back of that, I'm gluing 4 layers of thin white cardstock scraps. I like to do layers of cardstock scraps now behind my sentiment strips instead of foam tape because I feel like it holds its position better that way. Now I'm putting liquid adhesive on the back of that, and I'll add it right onto our card using a T-ruler to make sure it's straight. I did also add a few little silver gemstones onto the snowflake for some added detail. Here you can see close up the embossed impression technique and then the detail that these dies provide. I really like the embossed impression technique, and you can use it really with any wafer thin die, but it definitely works best with those that have lots of detail to them. In this Simon Says Stamp Diecember release, there are lots of other dies that work great for this. Thought I'd show them to you here. This is the Simon Says Stamp Shimmer Butterfly. It's very much like that last example, but a butterfly shape. You have the outline, the centerpiece, and you can use them together or separately. This would work great for that embossed impression technique. You could basically do the same design, just use different colors and get a spring card. I will say I also do think that this style of die would be great for a scrap inlay too. The little die cut pieces that you inlay would be tiny, so you could use even the tiniest of scraps. That's what I did with this example here. This is from a previous release, a similar die, and I will link to that video if you want to check that out. Another that would work great for these techniques is the Simon Says Stamp Shimmer Weath die. You could definitely use this for the holidays or change it up with spring colors to use in the spring. This has the wreath detailed die, then we have the outline die and the die that goes on the inside. So you could use any of those circle dies separately if you'd like. So you could definitely use this for any of the techniques that we talked about. Here we have another new one. This is the Simon Says Stamp Shimmer Oval. Perfect backdrop with lots of detail for any word die cut. Again, we have the inside detail die and the outline die that can be used together or separately. And one more die from this release that would be great for embossed impression is the Simon Says Stamp Filigree Message Oval die. So this is an oval die like the last one, but it has an area there where you can stamp a sentiment. And it's got the detail faux stitched outline too. Now, if you want to learn more about the embossed impression technique, I do have another video you can check out. I'll link to it here. And these are the card examples that are included in that video. I actually added watercolor to the inside of the embossed impressions. That's another way you can do the technique. Okay, my 4th favorite die cutting technique is definitely MONOPRINT. Now this name is a little scary, but it is so easy and it works great with lots of different dies. And even better, this is another technique that gives you 2 cards at once. For this, I'm using the new Simon Says Stamp Detailed Leaf Cluster die. Now they've got the same style die that they've come out with in the past that's solid and then has open leaves. This time you've got those details in the center of the leaves. I love the large size of this so that you can have it in many different positions on a card for a different look each time. And this die is definitely great for the MONOPRINT technique. Okay, to do this technique, you start with white cardstock and you apply a generous amount of ink. Now you could use dye ink, distress inks, or in this case, I'm using distress oxide inks. So try whatever inks you have. You want to put a lot of ink down. In fact, you can go direct to paper with the ink pad if you want. Notice that I'm really not taking any care to blend this and make it look perfect. The technique will take care of that for me. Just make sure you have a lot of ink there. Next, I have a piece of white cardstock that's cut to the same size, and I'm using tape to tape them end to end, kind of like a book. Now I have a piece of scrap paper that I'm going to use to protect the clean white side. And I also have a die cut that we're going to put in between. First, I'm going to hold up that scrap cardstock to block off the white, and I'm using my Tim Holtz sprayer to spray a pretty generous amount of water all over the inked area. You can play around with how much to add. I use quite a bit here. Now I'm going to lay that die cut down in there, close up my book, run it through my die cut machine as I would if I were running a die through, but I don't have a die here. Basically, we're just smushing it together. What will happen is some of the color from the colored side will transfer to the white side, and that white die cut that we had in there will block some of that color from transferring, and it'll leave an impression. So check it out. We end up with 3 pieces here. We have the inked side that we did with the Distress Oxide ink. We have the transferred color on the right. Then we have our die cut that now has ink on it too. I like to heat up the 2 pieces first or let them dry, and that allows the die cut to come off easily so that we can use this on a card too. Now the piece that I like the best and that I'm going to use today is the monoprint side, basically all the ink that had transferred, and you have an impression from the die cut. Such a fun technique, and it works with a lot of different die cuts. Now I kept the rest of this card very simple, and I used the new Simon Says Stamp Hello Crafty Friend die set. This includes the word die and also the shadow die. I really like this sentiment, but you could also cut the words apart so you can have hello and friend or hello friend alone and just leave out the word crafty. Okay, so I used this with gold glitter cardstock and white cardstock and layered them together and added it onto our monoprint background along with some glitter gold gemstones. Very simple design, fun technique, and I have leftover pieces that I can use on a future card. If you look closely, you can see the impression that die cut made in this background. Now there were a lot of other dies in this new Simon Says Stamp release that would work great for this monoprint technique, and I wanted to show those to you. This is the Simon Says Stamp burst die. So much detail to this. Both the positive piece that you see here and the negative piece are gorgeous and would work great with the monoprint technique. You would just use this die cut instead of that leaf one. It would be great for a summer sky, or you can just use it as a focal point for any stamped image. Another die that would work great for the monoprint technique is the new Simon Says Stamp Flower Swag die. Now this is actually a die set. You have that detailed flower swag and then also the partial outline. You can use the partial outline to create a border that lines up nicely with the swag die cut itself. Now I also think this die would work great for the scrap inlay technique and even for the stained glass technique that I showed you earlier. This is one of those that can be used in many different ways. And one more new die that would be great for the monoprint technique is the Simon Says Stamp Winter Floral Frame die. Just do a colorful inked background, get it wet, put this die cut on top, a clean white cardstock on top of that, and you'd end up with 2 beautiful pieces, and all you have to do is add a stamp sentiment in the center. I will link here to a video that shows many more examples about die cut monoprint. These are just a few of the many included in that video, so I encourage you to check it out too. Okay, the 5th and favorite die cutting technique I wanted to talk about today is shaker cards. Now, these can be often cutesy cards, but I wanted to show you that you can also create something bold and fun, or you could even create something classy. Now, for this example, I'm using new frame dies from Simon Says Stamp. Now, these dies cut a thin frame like the ones you see in the middle there, and then if you die cut them together, you can get a thicker frame like the ones you see on the right. This particular die set is for an A7 card, so 5 by 7. I like the large sizes of these, and in fact, I use them today. They also have a Thin Frames A2 die set. This is for a typical 4¼ by 5½ inch note card. So this is the set that I think most card makers would use. I like that they offer both sets so that you can have both options. And by the way, my dies are still connected here. You can definitely cut them apart to use them separately, but I like to use them together a lot. There's also the Simon Says Stamp Thin Frame Circle dies. This is what I used earlier on that colorful card with the little paint palette and paintbrush. So you have the 3 different die set options, perfect for creating those thin frames. And they're perfect for creating shaker cards. So I used one of the A7 frame dies, and I'm cutting it from a leftover piece of that rainbow cardstock that we made earlier. Here's the rainbow thin frame that I can save for another card. For this card, I'm just using that rainbow background piece. I also use that same thin frame die to cut 4 times from white cardstock. And I'm going to glue 3 of them together. So I just use a thin line of liquid adhesive and stack them together for dimension. I'm assembling my shaker window onto white note card that has a fog cardstock backdrop. So I'm first gluing down our rainbow piece. And then around that, I'm going to glue our white frame. Again, this is 3 frame die cuts glued together, so it's got lots of dimension. You could do even more if you wanted to. I just take liquid adhesive and run it right down the edge, and then I can pop those frames around it. This makes for a really easy and quick shaker card. In this frame, you can add anything you want, and I decided to use clear iridescent gemstones from Lucy's cards. And I actually flipped them all over so they were all laying flat on their back so that they shake nicely. Okay, once I have those arranged, I'm going to take my liquid adhesive and put a thin line right on top of our frame. And on top of that, I'll lay a piece of acetate that I cut to be the size of that frame. So you could use any acetate here. You can use recycled plastic. I had this leftover piece of Hero Arts acetate and it worked perfectly. So I laid it right onto that liquid adhesive. Then I'm going to put something heavy on top of it so that it stays put while it dries. After giving it a few minutes to dry, I'm coming back and putting another line of liquid adhesive around the outside edge, right on top of the acetate. And then I'm putting one last white frame die cut on top for a nice finishing look. You could also use thin tape for this, double-sided tape, but that liquid adhesive makes it really fast and easy. For the sentiment, I'm using the new Simon Says Stamp The World Needs die set. I really like this one. It cuts that intricate sentiment, and then there's also the shadow die included. I like when the shadow die is included because you can put it against a busy background and it allows the sentiment to stand out more. Now for my particular card, I didn't use the shadow die cut. I just die cut the words themselves from white cardstock twice, glued them together for a little dimension, and then I glued that right on top of our rainbow shaker window. So here is the final card. I wanted to make sure it was completely dry before I did any shaking. And check out how those clear iridescent gemstones move around freely, but you can see that bold, colorful rainbow background and that sentiment that floats on top of the window. By using frame dies, I was able to create this window of that shaker card and allow it to stand up on our card. But any kind of die with open areas works great for shaker windows. Before we go, I have a few more things I wanted to show you. Here's another word die set that would work great on top of a shaker window. This is the Simon Says Stamp The Best Is Yet to Come. Again, you have the words themselves that are all connected, and then you also have the shadow die included. This works great either on a card horizontally or vertically, and I like when a word die set works great in either orientation. Two other dies that would be great for creating shaker windows are the Birthday Wishes Circle and the Winter Wishes Circle dies. So these are sold separately, but they have a similar look and definitely would be great for a shaker card. If you wanted, you could even cut the circle off from the outside and just use the words themselves alone. I want to show you a couple more die sets before I show you a sixth favorite technique that I'm going to have in a future post. This is the Simon Says Stamp CZ Design Proud of You die set. We've got the shadow and then the words Proud of You. And I like that you can even use the U die cut alone along with a small stamp sentiment to create a different message. Another along the same line is the Simon Says Stamp CZ Design Thank You Die Set. Again, the shadow and the individual words. And these individual words can be used separately along with stamps for a different look if you'd like. Now, if you're wanting to learn more about creating shaker cards, I have a video here that I'm going to link. In fact, this video shows how to create shaker ornaments. So maybe this is something that you would want to create for the holidays coming up. So you can be sure to check out that video if you're interested. Now, I did come up with the 6th favorite technique that I'm going to show you in a post coming up very soon, and that's the card that you see here. I didn't want to include it in this video because I felt like it was just too much, but I wanted to show you the products that I used. I used the new Simon Says Stamp Leafy Christmas die set. This is the coolest die set. I wish this had come out before my favorite crafty things video because I definitely would have included it. There are 3 dies included in the set. You can die cut them from different colors of green cardstock and then layer them together to create a leafy tree. Now, I didn't pick the best colors of green cardstock to layer together because I just used scraps, but you can get an idea of the leafy tree that you can create and add little ornaments to and create a fun holiday card with. However, what I'm excited about for these is that you could use these as a little leafy backdrop for a large floral image or a large word die cut. Then it can be used all year round. So I went through my scrap drawer and I found some large flower stamped images that I never used. And I'm just going to show them here kind of as an idea of how you could use these. So you could use one of these by themselves along with a flower in the center, and check out that perfect leafy backdrop. So you'll definitely be seeing me use these leafy backgrounds in future cards, not as a Christmas tree, but as a little backdrop for some flowers. But stay tuned because in my next post, I'm going to show how to use these leafy dies to create a partial die cut border. That's my 6th favorite technique, doing partial die cutting. So stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, if you want to learn more about partial die cutting, I'll link to a video up here on the top right, and you can check it out. Okay, so there you have some favorite die cutting techniques. I hope you'll give them all a try. They're great for getting more out of whatever dies you may have. But if you wanted a closer look at the supplies I used today, I do have them linked in my YouTube description below and much more information over on my blog, which is up here on the top right. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you learned a thing or two, and we'll see you again soon.